Sydney, how you doing this morning?
Hey, good, Dalton. It's great to see you. It's been a little
I
while.
Yeah, no doubt. I am so glad I was able to catch you. I am really in a world of hurt right now. I've got data coming at me from everywhere. Everybody wants my insights, and then they send me this junk data.
That sounds like a classic problem for anybody who's working with data. I don't think you're the only
Really?
one.
It's not just me?
No, it's not just
I
you.
figured they were all trying to pick on the new guy because they'll send me data where they're like, these city names aren't even right, but I'm sure you can do magic with it.
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you say that because I just got some data internally that I'm trying to kind of work some magic on. So maybe I could walk you through that, and that could help with what you're trying to do.
That is an awesome idea. Hey, so what kind of data do you have?
I've got some healthcare data, which I think is perfect because it looks like you're wearing your Qlik healthcare jacket.
I'm all about healthcare. That is perfect. I want to see this.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That's probably the best way for me to show you what I've got going on. And hopefully we'll bring you into some Qlik magic. All right, Dalton, can you see my screen?
I can.
You can?
I can. It looks like it's custom for you. It's even got your name. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, in case you haven't seen it, this is actually our SaaS hub. But everything I'll do right here is the same regardless of where you're deploying. I don't know. I like the SaaS hub. Maybe I'm a little crazy. I monitor all my COVID stuff. But so what I'm going to do kind of first, just to start things off, is I'll create a new application. And let's, for the sake of what we're doing today, let's call it ETL magic.
Okay.
And create that sucker. And so, a lot of applications people get, they have the data already, and that's great. And you can do a lot. You can do self-service, you can kind of visualize, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times you start off in a case where you have data coming from different places. It's not clean. You got to figure out how it all joins together. And Qlik actually has a full ETL capability. So you can bring these different data sources together. And one of Qlik's, I'm sure you've worked with Qlik a little bit now, we're really good at bringing together lots of different data sources. And part of the reason we're able to do that is because of all these ETL capabilities. So I've got a couple different data sources. I've actually got one, I pulled a bunch of data from one system.
Okay.
Just some kind of, I pulled it into an Excel file here, but it's, it's coming from SQL, it's coming from lots of different stuff. And so I'm going to drag that data in. And what Qlik's doing now is it's prepping the data, and it's going to bring us into our data manager. So Qlik has two options when it comes to loading in data. There is the data manager and the data load editor. Data manager is the nice GUI, and that's what we're going to go through here. So if you haven't really worked with data a lot, this is probably the best place to start.
This is kind of my problem, because they send, I've got like lots of different tables, but it's not like I'm a DBA or something. I'm like, what am I supposed to do to make these things like talk to each other?
So we assume that a lot of people get data that they don't actually necessarily know how to bring it all together, because not everybody's a DBA. And so we've got this guided user interface that will show you how to bring all of your data together and make it easy to, add fields or replace null values without any coding at all.
No way.
Heck yeah. And so when I drag in this data, what it's now done is it's brought my different tables in, and I can see those here as bubbles. So each of these bubbles represents a different table. So in this case, I had a few different tables. I can, I could pull that up if we wanted to see the SQL server that it came from. And the size of these bubbles represent the number of rows. So typically, if you've got something transactional like orders, that's going to be bigger because it's got more rows than something that's, a little more finite, like number of patients that we work with or the different specialties that we have.
Nice. So like in our world, we've got some enterprise data warehouses. The fact tables are probably going to be much bigger than the dimension tables, and that'd probably be my clue, wouldn't it?
It would be. So typically that big bubble is going to be your fact table. And if you had multiple facts, we could work with that too.
So now how would I like join or whatever patients and orders? Because I'm imagining the orders are for patients.
Yep. So when we've got something like this, we actually don't require you to join your data together. So, typically you hear data, you hear right join, left join, inner join, outer join. How do you choose which one? We skip all of that. You can do these things, but you don't have to. So we use what we call our associative model or associative engine to bring your different data sources together. So we create associations between them and see how they're linked together. So for example, if I click on patients here, when I select that field, magic. This is the bubble view. My favorite view in all of Qlik, I'm going to be honest, except maybe the new trend lines. I love those. So when I click on one of these, you'll see a little preview of what I've got. So you can see my patient data down here at the bottom of the screen. But also all of my other bubbles are going to update with whether or not Qlik thinks there's an association between those fields. So green being, wow, there's definitely something going on that's matched between the two. Orange being, well, maybe there's something going on that's matched between the two.
That's incredible. So
yeah,
I mean, I know enough about the data. I think the patients would probably associate with orders.
Yeah. So let's find out. Let's drag it on top. And it looks like you're correct. So what Qlik now has done is created an association between the two. So it's created a link, I guess, between the two different, between your patients and your orders.
Okay.
And it found that they both share the field for medical record number, MRN.
Okay.
And
that
it
makes sense.
definitely made that. Yeah. And so what we could do at this point is we could go through and join every single one of them and, click on payer and see where we think payer goes and drag that on top. Or you'll notice on the right-hand side of the screen that Qlik actually has kind of looked at all those different data sources, and it's recommended some different connections for us.
How did you do that? Like, do you got somebody on the phone behind you that like did the work because they know this data?
Yep, there's an elf in the background that actually knows all data. Yeah. Now, so this is so Qlik is super invested in our cognitive engine and kind of our machine learning capabilities. And this is represented in a lot of different ways. This is in our conversational analytics and natural language processing. This is in, insights within the application. But one of the ways is in what we call accelerated self-service. So making it easy for you to bring in data and build a dashboard. And one of those, is suggesting a data model for you. And before I forget, I got an email this morning with another data source that I completely forgot that I had. So I pulled everything from one system, and I actually had an email come through with, another text file with some additional data that I needed, some provider information.
That happens to me all the time. They're like, oh, by the way, can you do something with this?
Like, it's so easy. Well, luckily it is so easy. So let me just drag that in. I'm going to add that in as well. Prepare some data. And what we should see in a second is another bubble. So we brought in one more bubble. It's just another bubble for, regardless of where the data comes from, it's just another bubble for us. Okay. And what I'm going to now do is preview this new data model. So I can look at all the suggestions it's going to make, and I can now even kind of explore in each one and see if it's making the right suggestions.
Let's take a look. How did it associate orders and payer? Let's
check it out. So both of them have payer ID. And so what Qlik is doing is it's looking, a shared field name is typically, that's one way for Qlik to recognize that you've got two fields that are the same, payer ID, they might be the same. But it's actually not only using field name, it's looking at all of the values and using what's called subset density. So how many kind of values do they share? And so it can even create a connection or that association between tables, even if the field names aren't exactly the same.
That would really work for me, because a lot of times when I get these things from our partners, they'll send me stuff that's from a different system. And it's like, your keys don't match what my DBA did because your DBA and my DBA didn't talk. So
it happens all the time.
Associated the stuff you just got in the email.
So let's check it out. Well, it looks like, they say not to do it, but it's associated apples and oranges. You can do whatever you want here. The field name doesn't matter. It's all about the data that lives within.
That's my problem. I've been taught all my life not to compare apples and oranges. That might have made my life easier.
Hey, why not have both?
So now it's got these associations. How would I handle things like if the data itself isn't right?
Totally. So, first I'm going to actually apply these associations. At this point, I've only, looked at what Qlik suggested. At this point, I accept it. I think Qlik's probably right. So I'm going to apply those, and I've now created my data model, which is pretty exciting. And it's not always perfect. So, if we look in between, you'll see this little bubble. This one's green. This one's a little bit orange. So it's still made that link, even if there's not 100% match between the two. So we might have patients that we don't have any orders tied to. That's fine. Because of the way the association works, Qlik is always going to bring in all of your data. You don't have to worry about, did I do the right join? Did I lose some data? So, in your case where maybe you're not sure what all the data, what it all is, this is great because you're not going to have to worry about accidentally writing the wrong, join and losing some of that data that could be really important for you.
I think this kind of thing is going to make me look a whole lot smarter.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, but you're pretty smart on your own. I'm sure they won't be too surprised. Now, your question. So what if you want to do something else? I mean, it's great that you can bring in data, but sometimes you need to make changes or clean up messy things. We've actually got all that covered. So what we can do now is go in and edit any of our tables directly before we even load them in for the first time. So let's start off with maybe the providers table. And you will notice, so, this is a pretty small list. And we've got a couple of things, but you'll notice from our email that we got earlier that they did give us a little heads up that there was an error in our providers table. So this is the one that we just got sent in an email.
Okay.
And there's a little ZZZ that shouldn't be right. It's supposed to be 999 or something else. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I don't want to deal with that right now. Clearly that the system, that team has got something they're working through, and I don't want this to mess up my values or have people kind of dialing ZZZ again. So I'm going to set this as a null. Make sense so far?
Yep.
All right. So if I click on this field for extension, I can now see all the values that I have, and it's pretty easy. I can come in here, pick ZZZ, set it as null, and it'll update my data. And automatically, anytime somebody loads in ZZZ, it's going to set it as a null.
Stop it. No way. That's too cool.
Yep. And no worrying about the kind of the scripting that goes on in the background.
Show me more. Show me more. Show me more.
All right. So let's go ahead and let's bring up our patients table. We got a fair amount of data here in the patients table. So, for example, let's say we've got first name, we've got last name, but, it might be easier for you if we've got something like full name, right?
That would be a whole lot easier.
All right, so let's go ahead and build that out. So I'm going to add a field in, and I'm just going to call this full name.
That's what I would call it.
That's crazy. Great minds think alike. And let's do first name and last name. And what's nice is when I bring this in, and I'm going to put a little ampersand in there, we get a preview. So all I've done so far is I put first name and last name, but if I do it just like that, we can preview right now and see that the field wouldn't probably be exactly what we want. We need to put a space in there. So I could actually go ahead and even add in a space and now preview that field that I'm about to create. And this looks pretty good. We've got old Al Yankovic in here, and some names that we may or may not already know.
Oh man, that's a nice feature, because you have no idea how many times I've tried to put stuff together and then somebody yells at me because they can't read it.
It happens to me all the time. Let's see, what else have we got going on in here? So, let's look at our city information. And one thing I want to point out is we've got a few different fields, and if we look at the top, they all look the same except for city. So Qlik is actually profiling the data as we bring it in as well. So it recognizes that city is a geographic point, which means that when we load all this data in and we start creating our visualizations, well, it knows cities should belong on a map. So if I drag city onto my sheet, it's going to automatically suggest a map for me. So it'll do things like that for dates, or it'll give you extra fields. So it's actually doing some light profiling of your data to make it easier for you when you're actually building out that dashboard.
Oh, I'd love to see something like that, because I put city names in pie charts and people yell at me.
Maps are pretty nice when it comes to cities. We can check it out a little bit later. Let me finish up cleaning this data. So, city is a great field, so let's drill into it. And Qlik is also giving us a little bit of profiling on top of that data. So you'll notice that I can now see kind of the distribution without even going into Qlik yet or building out a visualization or saying how many counts do I have of each city. I can actually look at this and get a little profiling. And you'll notice that I've got a few errors. You did mention that you've got some dirty data. Well, apparently I've got some dirty data too. Someone mistyped and put in Albany instead of, I'm fairly certain they meant Albany. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that up. So let's take Albany, and I'm going to make sure that both of them are named Albany. Boom.
What?
Simple replace.
That's going to save me that's going to save me a lot of time, Sydney. You're making my life too easy here.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, can you think of, so let's talk about some of the other challenges that you typically have with your data. What are some other things that, sometimes you get stuck with and you would want to be able to clean up maybe at this stage?
Well, I tell you, I was working on a set one time and the people were from San Francisco and they think it's the most important place on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And they would probably want to see that first. And I'm like, but A comes before S. And so my bar chart just shows it like this bar chart.
Yep. So we can actually set a custom sort order so that automatically when you sort something, it's going to be, custom. It's not going to be alphabetical. It's not going to be numeric. It's going to be the way that your users want to see it. And San Francisco is a pretty great city. I might be a little biased. I think that Philadelphia is the best city, but I'll go ahead and move it up to the top. So what I can do is right now it's ranked 7th because, this is how we do the alphabet, but I'm going to go ahead and drag that up to the top. And so at this point, once we load the data in, if you go to sort anything that's got city information, it's automatically going to put San Francisco first.
You didn't even do any coding and you got a custom sort order.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yep. Little drag and drop action. That's all it takes.
I should have had you doing an awful lot of work for me all these years. I've been trying too hard.
I would rather make it easy for you to do the work on your own.
Well, all right. And you know what I get a lot of times, people want to know, well, how many sales do we have in each area code?
Yeah, totally.
And then they hand me data like yours, where it's just got everything in one field. They're like, well, but I don't have an area code field.
Yep. So, we make that easy too. So if I want to come in here, I've got phone number and phone number does have area code. It's just not maybe split up in the way that I want to see it. So I can actually come in here and I can split any field. So maybe if I had first name, last name, I wanted to split them apart. Or in this case, I want to just take out the area code. So I'm going to go ahead and put a split, and I don't even care about the second half. I just want to make sure that I have a field for area code and a field for everything else.
Okay.
And so let's go ahead and create that.
Just like that.
Just like that. I've still got my phone number. I didn't get rid of a field. I didn't edit that field that existed before. I've just added a new field, and I'm going to go ahead and call this one, let's say, area code. And maybe this will be phone. Oops, phone 2. We like phone 2.
So you can actually change the names of the fields too?
Yep. I can rename any of these fields. So if I want this to be, phone rest, I can do that. Great name. And I can come in here and, I've got some weird funky data in here. It looks like we've got one international number. I don't really want that to mess with my data. So you can use your best guess at this point, or kind of what you know of the business and what they want to see. In my case, I know that my business doesn't really want to see any 11s in there, the international, they just want the area code. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that and replace that as well. And now I've got a pretty nice field that pretty clearly shows us what our distribution is of area codes.
That's crazy cool stuff.
Blowing your mind, Dalton, with all of our capabilities.
That's nice. So what else can we do with some of those tables?
Let's do orders. Last thing maybe that I can show you here is that you can create any field. And I did that a little bit with the first name, last name, but let's say we wanted to create kind of more of a custom or, a new calculated field. So we've got revenue, we've got costs, but I want to see margin or I want to see profit. Just going to add in a new field. I've got
to do things like that all the time.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to do this calculation on the back end. And it's also, when you start thinking about how you're using the data in Qlik, it can be a lot more efficient if you do some of these calculations when you're loading the data in line by line instead of trying to put everything in the front end in the visuals. You can do it there too, but a lot of it's kind of in the back.
So you're going to create a field that already does the calculation instead of me having to put it into my pie chart and my bar chart and my tables and the 18 other things. Put it here.
People are very demanding. So yeah, let's just give them a field that's called profit and make your life a lot easier. So a couple options I could start to type in here. I always end up being a person who types, but I can also use kind of these different buttons here to create, if I had something that was more, and wanted an actual function, I could do that. I'm going to keep things really simple. Let's just do revenue minus think everyone knows that sign. But if I did need a sign, I could actually come in here and it would put in a minus sign for me. Costs. Once again, it's previewed for me. I can hit create. And like that, I've got this new field in my data.
Wow. That's cool stuff. So you're able to load the data, you're able to clean it all up. And then what would we like, how would we start visualizing stuff now with this data that you've now transformed?
So let's say that we've done, at least for now, we've done everything that we know of. And what's nice about Qlik is you can always switch back and forth between the data load and the visualization. So if we figure out down the line, maybe we've got another city that we didn't clean up, I can easily come back and fix it after I've loaded in the data. But I'm going to go ahead and load my data in. And this is where Qlik is going to kind of take all of those different data sources and all the ways that they're associated and create an indexed in-memory version that lives underneath. So when you start to drag and drop and interact with your visuals, it's going to be in lightning speed because of Qlik's in-memory engine and that little index version. You could think of it like Google, how Google doesn't replicate all of the data in the world. It just makes it really searchable by kind of creating this index, and that's how you Google things. That's what Qlik does for your data. It gives you this like searchable, small, fast, lightweight version of your data. And then from here, I could hit close, in which case I don't go anywhere. I could edit the sheet and go into my blank landing sheet, but I actually wanted to show you how we can explore insights. Because typically you're not just bringing data together because someone says, hey, Dalton, throw this data together and do something with it. They're saying, hey, Dalton, throw this data together and answer these questions. And so what I can do now is actually ask questions of the data, or if I really don't have any idea where to start, if I hit this button, Generate Insights, Qlik is going to suggest a couple different or kind of a whole list of different visualizations that I might want to put into my dashboard. So let's scroll down. We've got some of revenue. That seems pretty important. So I'm going to go ahead and add that into my sheet. Maybe I want to look at revenue by provider name. Sounds great. Up here, we've got some city information. So you can see that it created a map for us automatically because we've got city.
Yeah, I got to have that.
Add that in. And then what else kind of appeals to you? We've got some state information.
That
this
was pretty interesting.
Nice.
So it's like multiple dimensions.
Which one are we talking about? Over
the
here,
one that was right up above that.
Yep. So we've got multiple dimensions in here. It's automatically adding additional dimensions. That might be a way that you want to break up the data. And
I didn't even know that you could do charts like that.
No, Dalton, check out our visualization showcase. We can do charts like anything.
Hey,
and what's pretty cool about this, just to kind of point out, we've got, it's not just simple stuff like building a dash or, revenue by provider. That's pretty simple. But we've also got some pretty complex visualizations that Qlik is building out for us. And so this right here is an example of what we call a Pareto diagram, which shows you contribution to the total. So, general surgery makes up 29% of our, of our orders or of our surgeries. And then internal medicine is another, that brings us up to 50% of our orders. And there's a calculation in the background that is a little more complex. You don't need to know how to do it. We make it easy for you. If I want to look at contribution, I can add that in and you don't need to go figure out how to script that into your chart.
My boss is constantly 80-20 rule, 80-20 rule. Why don't you show me this? I'm like, you're giving me bad data. I can't even hardly visualize a chart. And you're doing the Pareto chart for me.
Yep, we're trying to make it easy. So your 80-20 rule is right there. And let's even check it out. So I can bring in any of these visualizations and I can always come back here and ask some questions of the data, but I wanted to focus on the ETL stuff right now. So let's just look at what our ETL did for us. And if I come into the sheet, I've already filled it out with a lot of different visualizations. This looks pretty complex to me already, or robust, I should say. And it's all linked together. So if I click on a specific provider, let's say Rob Roll, everything's going to update when I make that selection automatically because it's all associated. It's all linked together. And I can make whatever selections I want. Let's focus in on pediatrics. And maybe now I want to flip back and see, well, what other providers are we, are ordering pediatrics from us or ordering for pediatrics? I can clear that selection up here and really freeform explore all of my data.
That is crazy cool, Sydney. Hey, I appreciate this so much. would you bear with me 1 second? I need to order a book online or something because I need to learn more about this.
This tends to happen.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Here comes the Amazon driver right here, handing me a book through the window. Let me just read this. It'll only take a second.
Take your time.
Okay. Hey, I think I need to go off and take a test on this now. I just got certified, Sydney.
Congratulations.
All because you got me fired up, because I could see myself having an amazing career by being able to load data, transform it so quickly, and move on. And now that I'm a certified data architect, I really understand more about these transformations. Would you like me to show you what I've done?
Yeah, it sounds like you're maybe even more advanced than I am at this point. So could you kind of give me a run through of what else I could do with this data?
I would love to. And I did just read that entire book and take a certification test. So
you are basically, you can regurgitate knowledge for me at this point.
There you go. So I loaded your app, you know, just behind the scenes while I was reading and taking the certification test.
Qlik is great for collaboration.
And I found a couple of things that were out there that, you know, I think you missed.
Oh yeah. Man, Berkeley, how did I miss that one?
I know. Yeah, Berkeley there, like that's not good. And look at this. There was some case sensitivity in the file. I get data like this all the time. And you didn't even notice that stuff. You just skipped right by it. And we're cranking out charts. And this was one of my problems too. I tried to get number of providers groups that are for each specialty, because there was a relationship there. And I've got like this sign here telling me that there's a number missing.
Interesting. And you've got hair replacement and nail cutting.
It wasn't even found.
Jeez.
And I've got hair replacement and nail cutting as specialties, and there's not even anybody working. And I get this all the time where people are like, well, you're showing me a list of 1,000 things and we only actually sell to 5 of them. How come I got to look at all these names? And then you calculate the profit. We need a net profit too, because there's a discount field.
I totally missed that. This is what happens when sometimes when you bring in the data, you see part of the picture, but then once you start playing around with it, you realize that you got to fix some things.
I know the app's already built and stuff. And since I read that book and I'm a certified data architect now, I probably wouldn't use the wizard. And what's nice for a guy like me who wouldn't use the wizard is Qlik gives me the ability to do the same types of things in a script instead. And so on the right here, these are all the types of connections that I have access to now as the architect for the company. And so I pull stuff right off of GitHub, and I pull stuff out of Snowflake, and I pull stuff out of Amazon all the time, and REST APIs and stuff that's probably way too complicated, but I pull all that data and get it associated. And the nice thing for a guy like me is knowing I can just press unlock. For that script that you did in the wizard, that's good for somebody who's starting. But now that I'm an architect and I want to go a little further, I can unlock it. And now I take ownership of this. And so if we look through the code, that magic that you said it was magic, that it was making it new about cities, it really found it, and it started loading all the data to convert from those city names to points on a map, and then to something called a polygon, which is the geographic boundary for those things. And all of that information to convert all that code was already done for me. Of course, I'm sure I could just on site just start typing it, because you saw how fast I do stuff. And here's the orders. So your orders table, it converts that field procedure date to a date.
Yep.
And then at the bottom of the code, it did some really neat things that we didn't even look at visually, but it converted it to just the year and the year and the month and the year and the day and the blah, blah, blah. The 85 ways people want to slice or dice data by date.
True.
So that was nice. That saves me a whole lot of time.
And you can actually take a date, even when you're bringing it into the data manager, if you wanted to have that date be month, you know, year, instead of, or month, day, or day, month, you can actually make those fixes in the data manager before you even get back here. And it would reflect in here in the script, I imagine.
That is crazy cool. That is crazy cool. And here was where your apples and oranges got converted. But man, anytime I like show people these ridiculous database field names, they always want something nicer. So one of the things that I want to do here now is change this, because I know that this is really my provider key. And this is going to be a lot easier for me to maintain code by giving it a friendly name.
People might understand that better than apples and oranges.
So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to change that as well. I'm going to make sure that it's associated on the provider key instead of apples and oranges. Just when I come back in the code, I think that's going to be a little bit cleaner for me.
Perfect.
And so here's where it did your revenue minus costs as profit. And while this is kind of a simple transformation, I could easily come down here and I could type revenue minus costs minus discount, but I don't want to do that because there's math that was done there, right? And man, if I had to redo that math, that could be a really complicated formula, Sydney. And one of the things that I can do here as a transformation is I can let it do that math that might have been a 55-step process, and I can instead say, hey, once you load that stuff up and you now have new field names with the work that's been done, I can say profit minus discount as
that's wild.
Net profit.
So I can essentially do a calculation, like something long, complex, and then if I need to do another step on top of that, I don't actually have to copy it over again or anything like that or edit it. I can just do another step later.
Yep, and that's called it's oddly called preceding load, even though it's really more like a post-seeding load.
Yeah.
But nobody uses the word post-seeding ever in vocabulary.
No, I've never heard that before.
Well, but if you were looking that up online, you would look up preceding load, and that could be layer after layer after layer, because again, in this case, it's a super simple math. But that could be a much more complicated formula that maybe we don't want to repeat 10 times for speed, because we're not dealing with normally 10 rows of data. We're dealing with thousands or millions or billions of rows of data, and we got to think that through.
I could see that being really helpful when I've got a lot of parentheses.
Yep. So let me go ahead. I'm going to load this data now. And this was similar to what you did. It goes off and loads. Did all that. We'll jump back to our sheet. And one of the things I can do here, just click on this. And so I want to edit my sheet, and I want to show you that that net profit is now available. And so now I've got that net profit without me having to do any type of math in my chart. And I could use that in a bar chart, or if I wanted to replace instead of using revenue, I wanted net profit in that pretty map that you did. I'd be in business there, and I'd be able to take care of that. So one of the things that we looked at here in this specialty, we also have these dashes between internal medicine and general surgery and family medicine. And sometimes different systems have issues like that where they force a space because they don't allow spaces or something in their system. And so we want to get rid of that thing. So I can come down here to specialty, and what I would do, just like it did for you, I can change specialty and say I want to get rid of that dash and I want to replace it with a space. And now we're going to call this specialty name instead.
Love it.
And so that would take care of that problem. The other thing that we had, if you remember, was I had some specialties that weren't even found.
Yep. There were some null values in there.
And I really, you know, that diagram brought it in kind of as a snowflake, and my people, I really want a star diagram. And so what we can do, instead of loading this data, you'll notice that, like for city order, it created this thing called a mapping load. It's just internal memory only. And so I'm going to change this to be a mapping load. So there's not going to be a specialty table. There's only going to be internally to memory. And then where I have specialty ID, I need to map the ID to the name. It's like a lookup for people who have to do
it's
these
like
crazy
that's like a VLOOKUP in Excel.
85 workbooks, right? Like that's crazy. It's a similar concept. So I can say, hey, I want to apply a map to this. And the table I want there is specialty.
Geez, I wish I had this in college when I was an intern working in Excel.
And one of the things, instead of that dash being there telling me that value isn't found, I like to use a definition called undefined, or some people would say not applicable, not found, doesn't exist. Whatever they want to do, it's going to replace the blank with the word undefined so that I could search and say, look at all your bad data. Here's all the rows that don't match. And then I can calculate things that way. And we're going to call this specialty name. I could type
so even though I've got specialty name in my specialty table, and now I've got specialty name here, it's not, is it going to have the table twice, or what's going to happen there?
No, because this is a mapping load, it only exists in memory, and you're not going to see the specialty table anymore. Instead, I will actually have put the specialty in with the provider group itself. So let me load that data, and I can show you that. So one of the things that I use with script, now that I'm a certified architect, you know, for my 5 minutes of training, I bounce to this view all the time. And you can see now in my provider group, I've brought that name in, and those spaces, those dashes are gone from it. And you can see I've got this one that has undefined. So now I'm only going to look at the specialties that are real, that I have data for. I'm not going to see the nail cutting and the hair styling, hair replacement stuff. I'll only see the legitimate ones that we have data for instead. There was a couple of other things that we wanted to do back here though. So if I come down to patients, we had a couple of capitalization differences, right? So I'm going to come down here, and Qlik has a function called capitalize that will properly case that thing with the first letter before any space being, or after spaces being uppercased, and then the rest just lowercase. And we'll call that state as well. And so now if I load this data up, I can choose to look at that in my data model if I wanted to. So I don't even ever have to worry about going to screens, and I could scroll and see this, and it's completely cleared up the uppercase Californias and Nevadas, and I'm good to go pretty cleanly. And it doesn't really matter as a data architect when I'm doing these transformation if I'm a very good designer or not, right? That's the nice thing about the wizard you showed, was I got to see charts I've never even seen before, and helps make me look better. But as a data architect, now that I've read my book and took the certification test, gosh, that's really, you know, a little bit beyond me. I can take that mapping that your code generated.
Oh yeah, there it is. So right? So what it was doing when I replaced in the map was it was actually creating another mapping table for us.
Exactly. So there's work going on behind the scenes that wizard does to make up for the lack of having a certified data architect like myself right there on site with them.
Now they got you.
So we can load that up. And if I were to come back into this, I would be able to look there, or I can just go to that sheet that I had created, and we'll come out here, and you'll notice now it says, hey, there is no specialty because we've got to choose the right name. And so I will come in here. You know what? I renamed it to specialty name, and it's nice that it fixed it for me. And sure enough, I've got the right specialties now. I could immediately see where did that undefined come from.
Yep.
I've got my cities cleaned up. I've got my states cleaned up. I've got some new fields, and I'm pretty much in business there.
It seems
So
like a good place to start.
yeah, that's some really good, easy transformations. Qlik has about 300 functions that could be used to transform data. We don't expect you to have everything perfectly cleansed when you get ready to do it. Hey, I've got one more thing I could show you if you'd be interested. This is a crazy case. I'm sure you've never heard this case before, where I've got data for people who were working, and then they want to say, hey, how many people were working at these hours of the day, and how many minutes was worked at these hours of the day. I'm sure you've never seen anybody who needs stuff like that, right?
No one ever wants to look at hourly information.
No. So this is the data that would come in raw, and I can read it in, and I'm just making some fake data here. I'm saying this person worked this day between this time, and they clocked out at that.
Yep, clock in, clock out.
Yep. So you have heard of this. You were tricking me. You've seen these types of use cases. That data's all over the place, right? If I load this data up, I've got my 8 rows of data. And if I were to look at this on the screen, it's going to look just like this. Hey, here's the times that they clocked in or clocked out, but they want to know hour by hour, day by day, how many people were working and how many minutes for any particular hour slot were worked. And that is usually a pretty big problem.
Yeah, how do I do that?
So I'm going to change this. I'm going to get rid of this exit script. An exit script allows me as an ETL programmer to come in and say, hey, let me just check my work. I want to see where I'm at right now. So I've got that data. What I would need to do is have a calendar of every minute of the day for every day that people have worked. And I want to try to figure out, hey, who's in which slot. One of the crazy cool things that I just learned while I was flipping through my book was the fact that Qlik can actually generate data, which is really good. So the first thing I want to do is say, hey, what is my boundaries? Where are my clock in and clock outs, right? The thing is, if we looked at the screen, we would be able to see it, but we need it in code. So I need to find out what's my lowest starting time so I can do an aggregate function as part of my ETL. I can get my max. Qlik allows me to set these variables where I'm saying, hey, take that timestamp and convert it to a date field where I only see that it was 9/1 and 9/2. And so I can do transformations between data types like timestamps and dates. You'll see where I'm going to use that in a second. And then what I want to do is I want to generate a calendar of every minute of the day. Man, that's a lot of minutes. I could tell somebody, can you type that all up in a spreadsheet?
Yeah, I was going to say, do I find that in Excel?
Right now, you saw me as fast as I typed for my certification test. I could type fast, but I don't want to generate every minute of the day. As part of transformations, you actually have the ability of the same basic type coding that anybody's ever learned, for loops, where I can loop through. So I say, hey, you know what? Loop through every hour of the day and all 60 minutes of those hours and create data on the fly for me to get a calendar of every minute of the day. Whew. Now I got to figure out how many days difference between the last clock out and the first clock in. And so I can do coding like that. And then I come down and say, well, now I need to generate data for those days. So I want a September 1 and I want a September 2, right? Then I can combine my time table with my calendar table because I need every minute of the day for every single day in the calendar. Does that make sense?
Yep. So far I'm following. So
Right?
we are
So I can go
creating
through
a
that.
calendar, and then we're creating hours within that calendar.
Yeah. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this exit script that I showed you before. I'm going to load this data, and I want you to see what our data model would look like as a result of having this. So let me bring my data modeler up.
So we've just created a whole new data set, a whole master calendar.
Right on the fly. So I have my labor data, which you saw before. And I have this new calendar now that has September 1st.
Yep.
And I've got some other nice fields about it, like the day of the week, yada, 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 yada. And you'll see that I've got a 1200, a 1201, a 1202, a 1203, a 1204, and it's for every day that had the labor records.
Amazing.
Right now, all you've got to do, Sydney, I'll put this in a big spreadsheet for you. And then you just have to look and say, now, which hours does that one fit in? Right? Because you'll see the whole counter. You could do that by yourself, right?
Totally. Yeah, definitely. I could just kind of go through one by one, and it's really easy.
Right. And basically all you're doing there, it's a simple grading problem, right? I've got a time and I need to find what interval it matches to, right?
So could Qlik match the intervals for me?
Oh, now you're thinking like I am. Let it do it for me. This is crazy. There's a function called interval match. How poetic that they actually called it interval match to help you match data between tables where you have things like intervals. And all I do is say, hey, find the interval that calendar timestamp maps to. And so I'll remove that exit script. I'll reload this data. And we're going to take a look at our data model now. You'll also notice I did this inner join, which lets me say, hey, I only care about the matches where there actually is a match.
Yep.
And so if I look at my model now, you'll see that I do have a relationship. And sure enough, I've got a calendar timestamp now here telling me which minutes they worked for each of their check-ins and checkouts, right? They clocked in at 10. So I've got 10, 10:01, 10:02, 10:03, 10:04,
all the way to 4:42.
Kind of cool, right?
Seriously.
Now, instead of just seeing this, I would then be able to see, hey, you know what? On 9/1 at midnight, there was one person working, one person working, one person working. At 9 a.m., somebody else clocked in. And then another person clocked in. And then another person clocked in. And for each hour of the day, I can see the total minutes that were worked by simply saying, count every one of those matches that was in that interval. How cool is that?
That's awesome.
Right now, there was an awful lot to that load script that a data architect would do. But just thinking through kind of the art of the possible with transformations, this is the kind of thing that businesses really end up with, right? They've got this data and they need it brought together. And that's not typically the kind of thing you wouldn't even do that in a data warehouse, because you'd be looking at billions and billions of rows and you wouldn't want to do that in your warehouse. So how do you do it? Right?
I had no idea Qlik could do this.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's why I'm helping you. You help me, I'll help you.
So, you know, I'm sure there are tons of other use cases like this where it's like, oh, you know, master calendar, just things that maybe I'm struggling with that everyone else is too. Where would I, you know, if I want to learn more about how to use the load script and how to do these types of kind of complex things, is there like a community that I can go to look for these types of questions? Or
that's a great idea. I mean, I just ordered this right online, had it delivered to my window. I read through it. But yeah, that if I were getting started and I was in somebody's shoes, you know, watching our video, I would probably go to Qlik Community and just ask those questions. How do I do this? And you're going to see examples. hopefully they have enough motivation now to understand, wow, there's so much more to Qlik than just painting a bar chart or a pie chart on the screen. Just because you get dirty data emailed to you, or you need to bring different data sets together that somebody else didn't do for you, you're not left high and dry. You can actually start the work pretty easily. There's a wizard to help you get going if you're at the stepping stone. If you're a hardcore developer who's read a book, took a certification test, and you like to code, you can do it in the script editor instead. And once you start scripting, there are things like this that you're going to be able to do that the wizard's not going to do. But this interval match can be used for financial functions where I'm looking at general ledger charts of accounts and I need to roll things up. I better be looking at a match and roll things up. You can do things where you're joining in Excel and there's a lot of blank rows. You could actually have a match between a starting and an ending other data field and then match to fill in those missing rows from Excel. So lots of great things you can do as transformations to get that data up and running, and you're going to find it right all out on Qlik Community.
Sounds great. I had no idea that Qlik had such a robust ETL capability, and then I don't need necessarily an ETL tool when I'm given a data problem in order to bring that data into, in for analysis, in for data exploration, and for everything else that I know Qlik is great at.
I didn't either until you showed me and got me so fired up I was ready to go.
I'm glad we could help each other today.
I think we should go take on another challenge.
Yeah,
we got to run. Y'all have fun.